So I wanted to just thank Nizar for his generous support, and he wasn't able to join us, so his very amazing wife, Alba, is going to do the welcome on his behalf. Floor is yours, Alba.
Hey, hi everyone. So I get to choose who my husband sponsors all the time. It's my favorite part of our marriage. But October's my birthday month, so I told him he needed to sponsor this one because I don't need another tchotchke, and the money should go to my favorite organization on the planet. This darling little guy there is my husband. He's a saint because he tolerates me. Light a candle for him every day. He does a lot of different things with American Family Insurance. He has his own agency on Sunrise and Swan. So if you ever need anything, give him a little ringy dink. He does health, annuities, home, life, and then charitable giving through life insurance, which I always like to share with my donors because it's the easiest way for them to leave us in their estate. And it doesn't cost anything. Auto and then commercial properties. He has, they speak various different languages in his office: Mandarin, Arabic, Spanish, English, and there's like a Chinese, and there's another one. There's one more I know I'm missing, French maybe. But anyway, anybody who needs anything, send him on over. He is always happy to sponsor all of my fundraising endeavors and everything I'm passionate about. And he knows how much I love AFP of Southern Arizona because I have been a member since 1994. Don't do the math. I'm a spring chicken. But anyway, nonetheless, I will stop sharing. Back to you all.
Thanks, Alba.
He's much fun. He's very serious.
I checked out his website, and all of the different languages that are spoken in his office are listed on the website. So if you're curious, go check out the website, and there we go.
And then scholarships, little linky poo is right there on your right. Apply for a scholarship. If you are not a member, this is your chance. I get to be Oprah. I get to give away scholarships. It's my favorite time of the year. So if you don't have one, please apply for one. And if you have colleagues and people who are just getting into the fundraising business, this is their chance to get a fabulous scholarship and get involved with the most amazing organization. Okay, I'm done talking, promise.
Thanks, Alba. No worries. Okay, so Kristen Merrifield is joining us to talk about advocacy fundamentals for fundraising professionals. Kristen is the Chief Executive Officer for the Alliance of Arizona Nonprofits. She knows how to solve big problems and create consensus around complex issues. Her experience leading efforts to support community stakeholders makes her an asset to our nonprofit community and the great state of Arizona. Kristen, welcome. Thank you so much. And the floor is yours.
Well, thank you all so much. It's great to be here with you. Thanks for your flexibility today. I know you guys are normally early birds in the morning. We actually had a great policy council meeting today. I looked through the list of everybody on here. I don't think, Travis, were you in there today? I don't remember seeing you. So this might be new information, but this is an open invitation for you. Anybody that's on the line that's an Alliance member, we have a nonprofit policy council if you want to really get into the different policy issues impacting the sector. But so thanks for the lunchtime invitation. I do have a slideshow today, and I do have some points that I want to share. Obviously, some of you are very actively involved in policy already in your organizations or in the community. But I want this to be a conversation today. Obviously, this is a group of development professionals, and I want to make sure that we think about our topic today, while it is advocacy, think about it from a development lens. There are a lot of things that cross over into development when we think about our communication with donors, the mission that we're really wanting to support in the community. So I will be calling on maybe some of you if I don't hear you speak up already during my talk today, because I really want this to be a great conversation where you get out of it what you need for your specific role and maybe learn a few things along the way. So I have the chat. It's not open because I can't see on my screen. So if someone wants to, jump in and say, hey, there's a question in the chat, I will not be upset about being interrupted.
We'll keep our eyes open for stuff.
What was that, Ori?
We'll keep our eyes open for questions on there and let you know.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. So normally I start out these conversations, and Travis and Maddie have probably seen this slide a few times, but I think it's so important to start out with just kind of some general information about what is okay as a nonprofit, what are some things maybe that we can do, but we need to check the fine print, and then definitely things that are not in our space. So for those, I believe everyone's a 501c3 on the phone. If you're not, let me know. We might have a 501c4 in here, or AFP, maybe a 501c6, for example, since they have a membership base. But we're going to talk primarily about 501c3s, so keep that in mind that this would be a little bit different if you were a different type of nonprofit. Things that are definitely okay and that we should be doing a lot of as often as we can really relates to general advocacy. And that really has to do with educating the public, educating decision makers, why you do what you do and why others should feel as passionately about your work as you do. You could be sharing information about how dollars that you've received from public sources, for example, have been really impactful and allowed your nonprofit to do its work, or communicating how broader issues might impact the people that you serve. So it may be something where it doesn't fall directly within your mission, but you know that if those things were to happen or not happen, it could impact the community in which you do fulfill your mission. And then in the second section here, things we can definitely do, but make sure you check the fine print or know the criteria. Voter education, registration, and candidate forums. This is sometimes an area that nonprofits shy away from because it does have that political angle. But a lot of nonprofits do a lot of really great things in making sure that our community and the people that we serve understand their civic right and responsibility to vote, to have their voice heard. And so doing the education around how to register to vote, why it's important, making sure that they have all the information that they need is actually a really great role for a nonprofit to play. This candidate forum area is really where folks start getting a little uncomfortable, but it can be done when we're making sure that we have all of the different candidates invited, that we're not leaning towards promoting or supporting one particular candidate or one particular party. You can still provide education around the candidates, what they stand for. There could be issues on the ballot that you want to educate about. As long as we're doing that in a nonpartisan way, that's absolutely within our role as a nonprofit. Naming legislators who support or oppose a specific piece of legislation. So again, we just have to be careful about how we're doing that, that we're not doing that in a way that is promoting that candidate, especially if they are running for office. So if they're actually have an open election happening, that's where we have to be careful. But if they're a sitting elected official, or it's something that you're doing in terms of education, there are ways to do that. We just have to be careful about how we go about doing that. We can do lobbying. I'm a registered lobbyist. That sounds a lot fancier than really it is. But we can ask our legislators and our elected officials to vote yes or no, or to make specific decisions. We just have to be careful as nonprofits about how much we do that. And any guesses on what the IRS cares most about when we talk about how much lobbying we can do? You can unmute yourself. We're a small enough group, or you can put it in the chat. What does the IRS care most about? It's an easy answer.
I mean, taxes. Taxes.
Taxes, you're close, Ori. Yep. Moolah. They care about money. They want to know everything about every penny that you spend. So their definition of how much lobbying you can do actually has to relate to how much money you spend. Not just the money that you spend maybe for a legislative event or to take someone to lunch, but also the money that you're paying your staff members or the money that you're receiving as wages for the work you do for lobbying. So there's a lot of different things you can look at to make sure you're within that limited lobbying definition, and I can provide more information to you offline about that as well. And then this one comes up a lot, lobbying and campaigning as private citizens. We're all private citizens. We all have our freedoms to say and do and show support or non-support for things that we're passionate about. So how do we know when we have the AFP hat on, or we have the Alliance of Arizona Nonprofits hat on versus our own personal hat? And so social media has made that even more difficult, right? But also when you're attending events or attending Zoom events, what role are you representing and playing, and making sure that you're clear about when you're talking about things that your organization is supporting or not supporting versus you as an individual. And that can be sometimes difficult. So what I talk to nonprofit professionals about specifically, and this definitely crosses over into development, and I'm sure you've had conversations around this at one point or another, is it's really hard to raise money for a cause that you don't believe in, right? It's really hard when your personal values, your personal views don't align with your organizational mission. That's really hard. You know, whenever possible, I would encourage folks to not put yourself in that position. Sometimes it might be that, you know, you have to take that job and you have to try to separate your personal and professional values, but that's difficult, dare I say, impossible to do. So think about that also in terms of your lobbying and campaigning. I've seen folks who say things on social media that are in direct conflict to their organizational mission and what the organization stands for. And while that's absolutely their right as an American, it creates some ethical issues and concerns about their ability to advocate for the people that they serve and the mission that they're serving in terms of their position with that organization. So just keep that in mind. And then down at the bottom, definitely not okay. Do not do these things. Red means stop. Organizational support. So as a nonprofit, showing support or opposition for a candidate or a set of candidates. So not only don't vote for this person or vote for this person or vote Republican, don't vote independent, et cetera, and so forth. And then spending federal grants. So if anybody has a federal grant that's on the line today, we can't spend any of those dollars on lobbying. Now, some organizations have asked me, well, we have this chunk of money, we have a federal grant, does that mean our organization can't lobby? No, you can do it, but you cannot spend any of those dollars. So again, if dollars are paying for a portion or an entire piece of someone's compensation, then they should not be spending any of their time doing those lobbying activities. So it's more about what those funds are being used to. But I would say, just be careful. For example, the Alliance has an AmeriCorps Vista national grant for national service. And again, none of the Vistas can work on anything related to lobbying. The Alliance can, but we have to be super careful about that, how that's worded, how that's perceived, how we divide that time. So just wanted to mention that. Any questions or comments or things that you've encountered related to this slide here? Hands. Okay, it's clear. Good, awesome. All right. So a lot of times folks wonder, well, where do I start? Okay, I get it. We can be involved. What are some things that I should be thinking of as I get involved? And this definitely will relate to your work as development professionals. Is your mission clear? And I don't mean, does it have a nice font size and it's up on the website where people can find it? I don't even mean, can you quote it and give it back to me verbatim? I used to, when we were in person, I used to do some workshops and I said, if anybody can stand up and quote your mission statement to me, I have a $20 bill with your name on it. And I don't think I ever had to give that away. But even just being able to quote it and state it and know what it means to the community, doesn't necessarily it means that it's so crystal clear when you start getting into things like advocacy and policy, because that will really test whether that mission is clear, not only to you as an individual, but what about the kind of the game of telephone when it goes to your board members, when it goes to team members, volunteers, and then especially the folks that you serve. Is it so clear that if you go out tomorrow and say, we oppose, you know, Proposition 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, are they going to go, oh yeah, I totally get it. That doesn't support the mission, things like that. So making sure that people understand it, that you're also evaluating the issues that come up in advocacy and policy. The more you get involved in these things, the more these questions will come up. So doing things in the beginning is really important. And so understanding where are the issues and how do they relate to our mission and how can we best communicate that to our constituents and the people that support our work. And then from there, thinking about, well, okay, this is our mission. So what issues are going to be important to us? You know, you might start at a broad level and say, well, we serve youth populations, or we serve folks that are immigrating to the United States. So these issues are important to us, right? Some of those are slam dunks. They're really easy to clearly identify. But then there's some other things that come up that maybe are like, they're mission adjacent, I like to say. They're not directly related to your mission, but we know that those things are needed or could stand in the way of the greater community that we serve. So an example for the Alliance would be, our mission obviously is to support, to unify, to strengthen the nonprofit sector in Arizona. So normally we stay up at the very broad level, things that are going to impact pretty much the entire sector. But what happens when there's a subsector issue? I'll use the example of when Planned Parenthood was excluded from the state employee giving campaign. That was a subsector issue. It didn't impact the entire nonprofit sector. However, we felt that it set a slippery slope. Okay, it's them today, then who is it tomorrow? What group are they going to target? So we took a stand in opposition to that. So those are some conversations that you're also going to want to be clear on, and creating a way for you to determine which of those issues you're going to get involved in. And then you can support or not support, right? So some of these questions are really talking about not general advocacy, right? Remember this slide in the beginning, educating the public, sharing information, all of those things you can do all day long. You could even say, this piece of legislation, here's how it's going to impact our work. That's still advocacy. When I now say we oppose this, and legislative person, we want you to do the same, elected official, we want you to do the same, we're now moving into lobbying. So we're asking for a decision to be made, and we're giving guidance on what decision we want to make. So how do we make those decisions? And so one of the things and the tools that we use at the Alliance, and you're welcome to beg, borrow, and steal, we've done that from other templates that we have from our national partners, is a framework. So again, the more you get involved, the more you're going to be asked to be involved. Sign on this letter, add your logo to this campaign brochure. Where do you stand on this issue? So we felt it was really important to create a document that could serve as a decision tree, if you will. You probably remember the books when you were a little kid, like if you want to go into the dark cave, go to page 47. If you want to go into lollipop land, go to the next page. So it's kind of a choose your own adventure, but it's a framework that we use often. This is just the first piece of it. But you can go on our website under Advocacy and Public Policy, and you can see the full version. But it gives us criteria so that when we're approached with these things, we have a clear, agreed upon framework to use. So it asks us these questions here in the bullet points. Again, does this impact the entire nonprofit sector in a significant way? And then do we feel, because we're a membership organization, but you could also reflect this to your donor base, right? Or the people that you serve, your constituents. Is there, or do we anticipate that there would be general support among our members on the position we want to take? Now, there's a caveat to that. We might say, yes, we've surveyed our members, we have a general understanding from our policy council, people are all on board, right? But we might determine that not everybody is on the same page. And I'll talk a little bit later about, how do we handle those conflicts and where are we going to draw the line in the sand? So that question can really help bridge some of those conversations. And then credibility. Are we the right organization to be the one leading the charge? Or are there other organizations that are already there in that space doing that work that we would be better off partnering with and lending our support to? Or are we meant to be more of a communicator and a sharer of information? Or is this the one the Alliance needs to throw our entire weight behind, lead the way, ask others to come on board with? So thinking about who's the right person that has the most credibility, the most relationships maybe with the legislators, the most constituents that are in their district. All these things start to come up when you start thinking about credibility. The rest of this framework goes into really even more specific, if this, then that. The Planned Parenthood, again, is another example. Our framework said, if it creates a slippery slope, then yes, we're going to get involved. And it talks about how we determine what role we play as well. So you might think about creating a framework. So it's easier to do this beforehand than when you get in the midst of something and you're trying to make sure you have consensus to move forward. All right, second, get to know your elected officials. I won't ask you to raise your hands, but how many of you know who your elected officials, your legislators, your congressional leaders are? Travis is smiling. Maddie's not on screen, but I'm sure she's smiling. Sarah's nodding her head. Yes. If you don't, get to know who they are. There are some links here, and I'll make sure, Ori and Sarah, that you have this presentation so you can send it out. But you can find out who those folks are. And again, starting now is better than when there's an issue and you all of a sudden need those folks on your side. Start now with that advocacy work of finding out who they are, send them an introductory email. When it's safe, you might invite them to come and view, your space, your location, see the services that you provide. You could send them a video, you could set up a phone call, and have a regular, consistent communication plan so that when you call them and you really do need them, they already know who you are. You've already created the value proposition of your important work in the community. They already know that you have a location in their district or that you serve people that are in their district, and they're more likely to go, oh yeah, I know Travis. I just talked to him 2 weeks ago about XYZ. Travis, let me know. What do you think? What's going on? But then they also will have you front of mind. So if there's an issue that you may never have known about that crosses their desk, they're going to go, I'm going to go call Maddie. She knows everything there is to know about this topic, and they're going to use you as a resource. So having that consistent communication, even if there's no issue, it's kind of like, when we ask our parents for something, they always know we want something. If we're calling them, we're like, oh, Kristen wants something. If that's the only time we call them, otherwise we could just be like, hey, I'm just checking in. I just wanted to say hi and really appreciate you. And thanks for all you're doing. The same could be said for your elected officials. It's nice to hear from you. You could call to thank them for something, or just to check in and say, hey, I wanted you to know your vote yes on this bill actually helped us, and here's how it helped us, right? So you're creating those relationships just like you would with donor stewardship, right? Talking to development professionals, you guys get it. You don't want the only communication that you have with your donor being when it's time to give again, right? You want to have established that relationship. They know the work you're doing, you kept them updated. And then when there is an ask, right, there's already that relationship. So it's very similar to that. This last bullet point, keep communication concise and personalized. They're busy. We're all busy. Yes, I always caveat that, but they're getting hit with a lot of different things. So the quicker you can get to the point, make sure you know, this is the next slide. I have stolen this from David Martinez, who's now over at Vitalist Health Foundation. He is the master of all acronyms. And so he refers to it as a piece of cake. When you're talking to a legislator or elected official, think about it in this term. Cite the problem. What's the issue? Why are you contacting them? What's the impact to the group or people or constituents or things that it's going to impact if it happens or doesn't happen? What are the solutions? This is one of the bullet points we often forget. We come with a problem and say, fix it. We could say, hey, these are the things we're already doing in your community, in your district to solve this problem. And here's the ask at the end of, here's how you could help maybe us do that better. Here's something that's standing in our way to continue to do our work. So make sure you have those, and make sure you have them to the point, concise. You might even create a little template, just like we do with donor letters. You've got it, and you can update it and personalize it before you send it out. Because there is strength in the letter campaigns, the email campaigns, and all of a sudden the legislator gets 6,000 emails and they all are the template. That gets their attention in terms of, okay, it's an issue, like, thank you, I get it. But then there's also, proof to having substance in there and personalizing it that may also get them to pay attention to that when their inbox is flooded on most days. Third is get to know the issues. We can't fight for things for or against if we don't know that they're happening. And that's where the Alliance really tries to be a partner to make sure that when there are things that we need to sound the alarm on, we're sending that information out to the nonprofit sector and our partners. But like I said, you can also do that yourself. You can track bills using the legislative app. There's the website right there, azleg.gov, and click on the bills tab. So this is obviously for things here in the state legislature when we're in session. You could type in a keyword to find out. You can even set, I believe, Maddie, I think you can set alerts, can't you, if I remember correctly, to get that information. We try to track a lot of bills that are affecting the nonprofit sector. So if there's a bill you want to add to the Alliance's legislative tracker during the session, let us know. We're happy to do that. Again, an open invitation for anyone that would like to serve on that Alliance Nonprofit Council. That council also looks not only at the state, right? There's not only the state issues we have to worry about, there's also things happening at the federal level that could also impact us, like the charitable deduction and where's all the COVID relief money going from the American Rescue Plan Act? You've heard the term ARPA. Where's that money going? So we also hear from our partners at the national level. So, knowing what's going on, getting on, newsletter lists, making sure that you're kind of scanning those and participating in groups like this with your peers. Because if we don't know about it, then we can't, again, we can't advocate for the people that we serve. And fourth, now you got that information, you got to do something with it. So this always freaks people out when we talk about the Request to Speak app, because they think they're going to be called on to speak at the legislature, but it's not just about that. I wish they would change the name. But when you go into that legislative app, or you go on the website there, you can find a bill, and the Request to Speak, it's not just for speaking at the hearing or at the committee meeting. You can actually just type in, are you for, neutral, or against? And here's why. And those things get reviewed when those bills are being reviewed as well. So you can make your voice heard without actually making your physical voice heard, but you can also do that. You can request to speak, and you've got some great folks on your group here that could help you if you've never done that before. They do a great job, so feel free to reach out to them too. Again, we talked about phone calls, meetings, events that you're doing, inviting them. And the last bullet point is something, again, that folks don't often think about. You have an incredible group of people that are your donors. They are people that you serve. And so mobilizing them and having them reach out to their elected officials is also extremely powerful. And again, we're not always asking them to lobby. We're asking them to advocate and tell the story. You can provide stories. They have great stories. I always talk to people about, it's great for them to hear from Kristen or Maddie or Travis or whoever. They know what organization we represent. They know our staff, and they listen, and it's fine. But if you can bring someone and elevate their voice as someone who's actually being impacted by your work or being impacted positively or negatively by these legislative issues, these bills, these propositions, telling their story or having them tell it is extremely powerful. So thinking about making sure that your constituents and the people you serve and engage with are also aware of the issues, and let them know, are you willing to come along to a meeting or a Zoom meeting, or let me share your story with a legislator, is extremely powerful. All right, so I'm going to stop here for a second and talk a little bit more about the advocacy and development piece. So some things that often come up, and this is where I definitely want you guys to share too, if you've had things that have come up and have created issues or opportunities, but some of the things I hear often about are questions around inviting legislators or elected officials to your events. It's a great, social media opportunity to post that and the photos. Can I post a photo? How do I invite them to the event? What should their role be? So I'd love to open the phone lines, if you will. That's kicking it back to like the 90s R&B radio station, but open the phone lines and say, has anyone had any experience or has any questions maybe around how you engage elected officials or legislators in your work, or things that you've done before that have been successful? I'd love to hear from you guys a little bit, and I can pepper in or answer questions as I need to. Has anyone had an elected official or a legislator come to a fundraising event before? Travis, you have? Okay. Maddie, what role did they play for you? How did that work for you?
For us, we invite elected officials to most of our events, and really it's an opportunity for education. So that's, something that we really use. And then after the event, always following up with the legislator, talking about how maybe a video that they saw at our gala might impact a program that is state or federally funded, and how that might tie into what I have been talking to them about for 6 months. And so it kind of gives a better, I guess, a more personalized example of the programming than I can.
Yeah, that's a great example, Maddie. It kind of brings life to what you've been talking to them for months about, right? Travis, what about you? How have you engaged them in your fundraising events before?
Yeah, and I would welcome Monique and Giovanna to maybe share a little bit more. I'm not at SAFE anymore, but I think it was really important for elected officials to be a part of fundraising events, especially things like AIDS Walk. One, I think it brings, kind of like a local celebrity, which I think people like, but I think it demonstrates that that elected officials still care about these issues and are invested in these issues and are willing to demonstrate that in a sense. And so I think it speaks volumes when they do have a presence. And I think at SAFE we had great success in bringing elected officials for tours. I think letting them know the work that we do, and if there's a topic that we could be called upon to speak about. I think, SAFE was born out of a pandemic. And so I do think, we had a role to play, and we're able to kind of speak to our experience with that. I say that like I was there for it. I was not. But I think it was important that, officials heard about our concerns for our clients who are living with or affected by HIV, and how their needs might be different than other folks during that time. So I do think it's valuable to have a channel there, and I think we had some really good relationships with some, and we're working on others. But Monique, did you want to add anything? I know.
No, absolutely. It's just helping to make that connection and making sure they really understand and get the opportunity to put a face to the missions, and to see the people that are being directly impacted positively or negatively, and how they can lend that support and connect. So yeah, I concur with Travis on that for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Something else that may come up. So, there's one thing with an elected official who's sitting currently in their role, or a legislator. What happens then when they decide to run, either for re-election, for a new position, somewhere else? How do you think that changes how we then interact with those folks who are now actively campaigning? What concerns would that raise for you potentially, based on what we've talked about so far? Yeah, Maddie.
I'm always very concerned about interacting with candidates in terms of equity among political parties. So as a registered lobbyist, you don't want to favor one side over the other if you can help it. On behalf of 501c3, if you're a registered lobbyist on behalf of a different type of organization, that's a different can of worms. But on behalf of 501c3, you cannot favor any political persuasion. So if you're inviting Representative, or I guess former Senator Engel to your building for a tour, you also need to invite Juan Ciscomani, who's running as a Republican. And so you have to make sure that you're at least extending the offer to both political parties and any major candidate. And even if you don't think that they're a serious candidate, or you don't think that they're going to support you, or you don't think, it doesn't matter, you have to extend the invitation. And if they accept the invitation, you have to treat them exactly like you would the other person that you toured.
Yep, absolutely. Because now that they may still be, let's say Governor Ducey, right? They may still be the sitting governor of Arizona, but now they're, either for re-election, or they're, wanting to run for Congress or something like that. Now they have that other role as well, and that has to be considered. A lot of times I've seen nonprofit organizations get asked to share information with their listservs, right? Because they know that you guys have not only a base of constituents that you serve, but think about your donor base, especially folks that are running for election. What do they need? They need votes, but what else do they need to get those votes, right? The same thing that the IRS cares about, money. And so your donor list becomes very attractive. So when they start thinking about attending your donor fundraiser event, hey, can you share information about, something that they're running on, or your ears should perk up, right? Because again, to Maddie's point, not only in how they attend the event and are treated the same and are invited the same, but also in your communication to your donor list. So think about those things when you have someone that they may be your legislator, but they're also actively running for something. Maddie, is that your hand, or just like a high five? Or
no, that's my
always
hand.
not sure.
One thing to note is that if you're inviting elected officials, and even if they're elected officials, if you're doing anything with candidates, regardless of their elected official status or not, even if you have their cell phone number and you are best friends with their campaign manager, it does not matter. Send an email, because you can track that with the IRS. So if there's ever issues coming back to you, make sure that you're always doing an invite over email, and that the email is exactly the same between both parties.
That's a great point, Maddie. Yep, transparency is super important. What about social media? We love to post out things on social media. So let's say you did everything that Maddie told you, great advice, and you invited everyone, and hey, they even all showed up. It was great. They were all treated the same. Your communication was transparent. And then you take some photos, and your social media manager, who maybe isn't a part of this conversation, is like, oh, this is a really great photo of this candidate with some kids or puppies or whatever. And they're like, we're going to post it. And then there was 3 other candidates there and nothing was posted, right? A very innocent mistake. And I don't say all these things to scare you. I do a little. But I want you to be informed, because a group photo would have been a great opportunity, right? And so the other thing is educating. Again, we may know this, and we're doing these trainings and we're getting educated, but if we don't then share that information with our board and our teams and the folks that are doing communication especially, then we could put ourselves at risk. Travis.
I really liked that last point. I wanted to bring up a couple thoughts and see if you had any advice or guidance on this, or if anyone else in the room does. But I think 2 things that I hear frequently from, fundraising professionals specifically, or organizations specifically. I'm on the board of the Children's Museum, and we're having this discussion. But should we be hesitant, or should we be mindful that when we speak up about issues, whether it's privately, directly with an elected official, or if it's publicly, taking a stance, should we be thinking about how donors and stakeholders might react to that, and how much should we be thinking about that? And I think the second part of that is, I think what I've seen organizations struggle with is, when should we speak up? I think it's clear when we're the experts in an area. For the Children's Museum, if it's a policy or something on the table that's going to affect youth development or something like that, I think that's clear. But where do we draw the line? And then I think when it comes to social issues, things like the Black Lives Matter movement, or Asian hate, or things that are just perforating every aspect of our lives, in a sense, what is our responsibility, and how do folks handle that? I know these are difficult questions to answer.
Yeah, that's a really, really great question. And that's kind of where I was leading to earlier. And I just did a talk with some association executives in Washington earlier this week, and their question was also around, we're the dental association, and then all of a sudden, we need to get involved in things like you just mentioned, Travis. How do we, when that's really not our mission, right? It becomes then a part of being a really great community partner and a human being, right? And the nonprofit sector is much more sometimes in tune with that than the general association sector, if you will. But that becomes where, your framework is really important, because you can really talk through some of those issues of how are we going to get engaged, and when is it right, again, for us, and especially Travis, when you start to talk about the DE&I related issues, when is it appropriate for us to elevate our voice versus elevating the voices of those that are impacted, or organizations that would be better for us to elevate their voice versus us getting out there in the market and just kind of, saying what we think. So it's really important to think about that. And that was a slide I had for them yesterday. It was just white, and it just had the words like, what are you going to do when conflict arises? Are you willing to lose a donor? Are you willing to lose a member? Are you willing to lose a board member? Because a lot of these things, the more deep, again, that we get involved in these, and the more stands we take and the more voices we elevate, we're going to lose some folks. And so being completely clear and on the same page, especially with your board, about where are we willing to draw the line, on the things that we feel so passionately about, that are so important to our community, our world, etc. We have to all be super clear and comfortable with that, because it's going to happen. I've seen it happen to the Alliance in the last year or two. Some of the issues and statements that we've made, I got some nasty grams, and some of them were extremely hurtful. And I had some moments like, but we were so passionate and firm and believed in those things that we were willing to do that. Now, are we willing to lose, I hate to put a dollar amount on it, but are we willing to lose a $50 donor? What if it's the $500,000 donor? If it's the $50,000 donor, whatever gift that is that makes sense for you. I use Planned Parenthood a lot, but it's just a recent example. When they were excluded from that state employee giving campaign, they lost X amount of dollars, but the amount they raised, because everyone was like, we need to show up and support them, was way more. Now, is that going to happen every time? Probably not. So Travis, you raised some good questions. I don't know that I have the answers to how each organization comes to answering that, but I will say you have to have those conversations now, so that when those issues come up, you do have this united front, and you're willing to lose some folks along the way, and for the greater good, that obviously is more important at the end of the day. But those are very real questions and concerns when you think about your ability to be sustainable and operate. So I'd love to hear from other voices on the call how you've tackled that or how you've approached that.
I don't know that I necessarily have, anything significant to add, other than kind of the last thing that you said, Kristen, is that, it's easy to say when you're not in the situation. That's like, oh yeah, well, we'll, stand for something and be willing to lose some donors. But when you said, are you willing to lose the $500,000 donor? Well, if that means you're not able to make your payroll and the organization might be at risk, now all of a sudden you are at risk of not being able to stand for the thing that you want to stand for. And so how do you, handle that situation? How do you rally and find other supports? And, which is, again, not to, I'm just glad we're talking about this right now, because it is kind of our time of the year to be considering these ethical questions. And Travis has a comment in the chat, if anyone hasn't read it yet, about trying to set up that framework so that we can all be ready to make these decisions ahead of time and not have them pop up on us.
Yeah. And Carrie, I'll get to you, and then Maddie. Scott, there was actually a really great session by one of your colleagues in the Phoenix area, but John Scola from, I believe it's, I want to say Boys and Girls Club, has done a wonderful session around ethics for nonprofits, and it gets into a lot of these things there. So if you haven't listened to that, I think you did it at the conference this year, because it's really an ethical question, right? And it also goes back to how are you communicating not only your mission, but the things that you hold important and are valuable. So you're attracting the donors, right, that they're already clear. They know where you stand on all these things. It's not a question mark. How you navigate that once they're donors, and then we start clarifying that becomes challenging. So Carrie?
Yeah, so the Community Food Bank has been working a lot on our DEI training with our staff and our board members. We've been kind of planning this for a little over a year now, but we're kind of in that situation right now. The organization is publicly backing the Proposition 206, the raising the minimum wage to $15 here in Tucson. And we've gotten those phone calls from donors saying that they oppose what we're supporting, and so they're going to be pulling their contributions from us. And pretty much what we have, responded to that with is that we appreciate their past support and respect their decision to do so. And that, again, we just appreciate their past support. And but with that, there have been a lot of people who have stepped up and said, hey, this is great that you guys are doing this. It definitely aligns with the work that the organization does, and we'll support you guys. So even like new donors who have come forward, seeing that we've been publicly supporting the proposition. So I guess it's kind of like you lose some, win some, you lose some. But just definitely sticking to your morals and what the organization stands for is really important.
Yeah, Carrie, that's a really great comment and point, because I actually like when people reach out and tell me they disagree. Now, some people you'll never convert them. Some of them you need to be like, thank you so much, and move on. But others, they're opening this door to conversation. And so I always have tried to lean into the conflict. There's a really good TED Talk about that. I'm not shying away from it, but actually leaning into it and leveraging it to have a conversation when they're open, and they're not combative, right? We don't want to put ourselves in a bad mental health situation, but take the opportunity to at least educate and inform, right? And share why they have supported your mission, and this is in line with that. And you have already thought about those answers. You've already thought about how it aligns. So you've already done the work to hopefully be able to share. And they may not agree, but at least you've educated another individual. Maddie, I saw your hand. Someone else's hand went away, so you'll have to raise that again, but I'll go, Maddie.
I think that it's a great question that you brought up, Travis, and I'm not, obviously I'm not a fundraising professional, so I don't know the chairs that you all sit in, but I do the public policy work. And one of the biggest aspects to analyzing any public policy is the impact on the goals that you have. And if your goal is to support your mission, then considering a $500,000 donor is worth a portion of your analysis. Does that mean it drives the end result of your policy position? Maybe, maybe not. I mean, it depends on what the situation is, but it is not ethically wrong to consider the impact of a donor that is giving a large amount of money when that money could be, something that would hurt your operations in general and prevent you from achieving the mission. So I think what it comes back to is associating with your goals and analyzing what specific aspects of this policy and the political feasibility and the impact, what all of those aspects do to that goal, and then making an analysis that way. That's how I would look at it.
Thanks, Maddie. That's a really great way to look at it. I just put in the chat, I asked my marketing team, can I give this away for free? So there's a link for you if you want to view John's session, Dirty Money, Ethics, and Nonprofits. I think it's just so relevant. And feel free, you can share that with team members too. You're welcome to do that. Hopefully it helps. Oh, and thanks, Spencer. That was your hands clapping. I don't know if it's clapping hands, like all the emojis now that we're in this fully virtual world. I sometimes have to ask and clarify. Hi, Ori and Sarah, how are we doing on time? I want to be mindful of other things you have on the agenda.
Yeah, about
Good.
10 minutes left, so no worries. If there are more questions, we can keep the conversation going.
Yeah, absolutely. Travis, I don't know of anyone specifically that has done the policy framework. We borrowed pieces of it as we were building it over the years from other state associations like us. So there's a little bit of a flavor in there. But that's interesting. I never thought about that. That might be something the Alliance looks into about, bringing some folks in to talk about how they've developed that. I know we've let people borrow it and take it because we did the same and use it for their own purposes. But yeah, that's a great question. Any other questions or comments? How you've seen development and advocacy and voting and propositions? You guys have brought up some great ones, but.
I was just going to add on to that, Kristen. I think from my experience, and this was at SAFE, but also at the Children's Museum, I mean, when you start thinking about taking on a bigger role in advocacy. I think it's so necessary. It's so exciting, but I think it's really easy to go down a rabbit hole. And it's safe. And at Children's Museum, we serve all sorts of people. And so, when things like immigration came up, everything is just so intertwined. And I think it's hard to stay focused, and it feels like they're big, heavy conversations in a sense. And so it's almost like a strategic plan to me. I think to have someone come in and facilitate those conversations, an outsider to think strategically and to come up with that framework would be a really cool service. And I think a lot of people would jump on that. I know Children's Museum probably would. But I think it's helpful to also have maybe someone who's has a bit more expertise in this area.
Travis, I was going to say, Travis, I think that it's great to have a consultant to come in and maybe help facilitate that. But much of the policy is so nuanced that unless you have somebody trained in analyzing policy, I don't think they're going to be able to do the full work for you. I think that you'll have to actually end up doing a lot of that work. But I do think having someone facilitate it is a very good idea.
Yeah, and you brought up a great point, Travis, that you also have to consider your amount of time, resources, et cetera, especially for smaller organizations, where you may go, oh my God, I believe in all of this and I need to support all the things. And then you don't even have time, right, to do the work that your nonprofit is trying to do. So that's where, again, thinking about, are we the right folks, or how can we lend our support in things that we're already doing, or communication? We may not be able to be the ones that are fully leading, but can we create partnerships with other organizations and share their information? There's so many things that you could be doing that will never even get to the point of doing a campaign, lobbying for or against. The information sharing and the partnering is huge. So you really do, you have to think about, what do we have the time and resources to really do? Think about volunteers as well. Could some of this be done through a policy committee of your board, or of volunteers that are interested or have connections? And you might also think, again, what expertise do you have on your board? As organizations change and grow, you need, I need an HR, and I need a lawyer, and I need a this and that. Not many people think about, I need someone who understands policy and advocacy. That could be a huge asset in terms of how you're recruiting for your board too. Jennifer, were you going to say something earlier? I feel like you might have had a thought coming.
So I was going to just say that I sit on the Arizona Grant Makers Forum Public Policy Committee, and I've just kind of been watching for the last 9 months and listening to how they talk about what they talk about, how they decide on the topics. And they also have a wonderful framework for just how they approach public policy and how we create our agenda of what our priorities are, and so just having that clear focus that's examined every year and rewritten every year, because policies can change, priorities can change every year. Like, I don't even want to go there, but I understand that our governor is not using the ARPA funds the way he was supposed to, and he's getting a little bit in trouble for that. So that's, for nonprofits, that's super frustrating, right? So I've started just by listening, I guess, is what I wanted to say.
Yeah. And I appreciate, Jennifer, you bringing in the philanthropy side, right? Again, we're development. We're not always just doing fundraising events. We're writing grants. And so we've been happy to see that we've seen a few more foundations come into the circle of trust here and actually be willing to provide funding that can be used for advocacy. That wasn't always the case. I still wish there were more and more. I think there's more foundations right now that are stepping and dipping their toe into even supporting DE&I work. There's still a lot of fear and concern around that. And we're pushing them and working with our partners at Grant Makers Forum and trying to understand it and push more towards that. But that could also be a part of your grant research, is if you don't have the resources or you need additional funds to hire someone or to do more around advocacy, create communication pieces, help you evaluate, maybe it's a consultant. There are foundations now that are willing to either provide general operating support that doesn't have the tag attached to it. You can't use it for advocacy. There are more and more that are getting into the social justice space. So that might be also something to consider in your grant research as well. Yeah, thanks, Carrie, for sharing that. And thanks for offering your help, Maddie. You're a rock star. I've loved seeing how more engaged you've gotten in all the things that you bring. So appreciate that. Any other thoughts or comments? You guys have been great. It's always great to get to chat with my friends in the nonprofit sector. Well, I will close by saying this is messy. It's got fear attached to it. It is unclear, but it's so important we have to do it. We cannot not do it. I'm a grammar nerd and I just use a double negative. You know how serious I am about it, because we are the voice of the people who don't have a voice oftentimes. So we've got to, figure it out, come together, collaborate, form coalitions, do things like today's call, and step out and maybe step in it a little bit. We've all done it and we learn from it. We be authentic and help others learn along the way. So I appreciate what this group is doing, and we're here, I'm here. If you have questions or concern, I know Maddie and Travis, you guys have done a lot of this too. So use your colleagues and reach out to them. We're happy to help. So thank you so much for the invitation to be here, and hopefully we get to see you guys maybe in person sometime soon, but if not, Zoom will have to do.